How's it going, everyone? We're going to be going over some Kamigawa Neon Dynasty spoilers today. This video is going to be a little different because, obviously, if you're watching this, you know that I'm an Abzan mid-range player. So I'm going to be kind of looking through the lens of, just how, these cards that might see play in Abzan. I do have some cards that might see play in other decks, that I might dabble into. Um, there's some cards that have a lot of hype, like Boseiju, but that might not necessarily see playing Abzan. But I'm gonna touch on it a little bit. So this won't be like hyper focused on Abzan, but it will majorly be based around how we could fit, cards that might have potential in Abzan as an archetype. Um, Boseiju Lane Slash, March of the Overlord Light. That's all about ones you need to hit. Yeah, exactly. I have some like other ones. Hopefully, we can fly through those. That some people wanted my input on in the Discord, like because I asked like if there's any extra cards. I went from like, I don't think I hit on them, and I was thinking about like I should probably at least like say something, since they requested it. So the first card that I want to go over is Yoshimaru. This is technically not going to be a modern playable card, but I'm kind of excited about it because I've been looking for an EDH general, and um, this is a pretty cool one to pair with Rayhan, Last of Abzan. I'm not sure how the +1/+1 application will like. I don't like +1/+1 counters in EDH. I think that's kind of a pain in the ass to hassle. So I kind of want to just maybe just have it with Rayhan just for like flavor reasons, and then just have kind of like a generic good stuff kind of deck. But it's kind of a cool commander because like I feel like in Abzan commanders, it's like the only really cool one is like Carador because Gave is like super like combo heavy, right? But just wanted to throw this out there. This is a cool card that's not in exactly Kamigawa. I think it's like in the commander set of Kamigawa, I think. But so cool. Still want to talk about it. Um, the Wandering Emperor. This is kind of one of the first cards that were leaked from the set. And I think this card has potential in modern. I kind of want to touch on it because if for some reason if they ever ban companions or Luris, or there's a world where we want to go a little more top heavy, I think this card is pretty cool. Just be able to like flash in a walker and then like make a 2/2 seems really cool. It's kind of underwhelming for the mana cost. With it, like the fact that it has flash is so huge. The fact that it could be a combat trick where you can give something +1/+1 in first strike. The fact that like it can be a removal spell, it's exile target tap creature. This card does a lot. I think this card is something that control players will actually utilize way better than a mid-range deck would, just because they're more likely to like just hold mana up and then they can just flash this walker and kill an attacker. Like this card's gonna be really really good in control. But again, looking at it from like an Abzan perspective, I think this has some play as well because against those control decks, being able to to flash in a threat, and then like you can kind of like bait a counter spell and then you untap and play a threat. Like this kind of does everything you want to battle those mid-range control mirrors. So again, a walker with flash is very very powerful, something to consider. If you can bypass the Luris deck building restriction in a non-Luris build, like this definitely has potential. Again, like for those who are aware of kind of my deck building philosophy, I do think that when you're going to build as a mid-range deck, you want to have a companion and have Urza Saga. So this kind of doesn't really fit in against Gigantha or Luris, unfortunately. But if we're able to like bypass those restrictions, I think this card's going to be really really good. This is kind of a card that was suggested in Discord that I would talk about. Just to sum it up, it's a 3-mana 3/2 with ninjutsu for 4, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top card of each player's library, and then you can cast it by paying its converted mana cost, like paying life equal to the converted mana cost. I just want to touch on this real quickly. This is a strictly an EDH card. A lot of people were like, "Oh, is this going to be modern playable?" I don't think so. It's just too random. Even if you like the ninjutsu cost is really expensive for 4. It's like a fun card, definitely. I just don't think this is something that you can reliably pay off for in modern. It's a very bad Fallen Shinobi. Exactly. Which you should know a thing or two about. Oh, God. The card is called Cloudsteel Kirin. Again, this is a card that I probably won't see much modern play, but I do think that it's something to kind of like. I like to like refer to these cards as just cards that we can have like in a toolbox, just to kind of like it might not be right for it right now, but it might like it might be a correct call to have a one of them in the sideboard against decks that really matters. Um, it's a 3 and a 3/2 flying, but if you equip it a creature, you can't lose the game. Your opponents can't win the game. So this can be relevant against like decks that are combo heavy or just if they just don't have like a creature removal spell. So then that way they can't really like this actually just wins the game. I think my chrome about this is against those kind of linear decks that fold to this kind of effect. I think post pour they bring in hate against this card, so it's like for example, like if it's like ad nausea or something, right? They're gonna board in like an echoing truth or something like that. Like they're gonna have like anti hate, and on top of that, this is also 5 mana, so it's really expensive. So even if you get like cheated in with like a Stoneforge Mystic, you still have to like equip it. So this really costs a lot. But that being said, I think it's still worth considering. Just again as a toolbox, there's probably once they play, but it's still something you should just consider. Especially like, and if anything, maybe you could, can you imagine like this in Hammer where you can just have a pure steel paladin and then it just equips to a creature and you can't. So like those are the applications that you think you could have, like where it's kind of annoying where, like it might not see play in Abzan, and I think it probably won't, but just something to consider and to think about when more cards get printed, meta changes, and this is something that you could use to combat the meta. Less likely again, but something just throw out there because I know someone wanted me to talk about this card as well from the Discord. I think you really need a way to cheat the reconfig. Exactly, that's what I was saying. Like pure steel paladin. The next card is Nezumi Prowler. It's 2 mana 3/1 ninjutsu. I think this is the classic card where people are like, "Hey, this card fits in Abzan Lyris, has synergies with Urza Saga." I think this card just doesn't do enough. The ETB effect is really, really mediocre. Doesn't really provide much value. At the end of the day, it's just a 2 mana 3/1. It's just card it's one of those cards where it's like really, really synergistic, and Abzan Midrange is not a synergistic deck. It's a like you rely on the cards to be powerful on their own, and this card is not. So I kind of wanted to address this card specifically because of the fact that you would think they would slot in well because of the synergies, but like the definition of a mid-range deck is it's a good stuff deck, and you want those decks to have cards that are individually powerful. Like I said, this card is not. Containment Construct, again, is a card that someone wanted me to talk about in the Discord just because of the synergies with like Liliana. I think the fact that if you are relying on this card to be good with Liliana, I think that's where it's kind of a fallacy. Again, in mid-range decks, you want cards to be good by themselves. If you go turn 2 this, turn 3 Liliana, discard a card, like if you discard a land, you really can't play the land anyway. I guess you could like discard like a 0 mana spell, like a Mishra's Bauble. I just don't think this card is good enough, even in like a Liliana deck. I mean, there could be some arguments with like 8-rack, but even then you're targeting your opponent. There aren't really much symmetrical decks against like Smallpox, but then again, that's more of like a deck that's geared towards discarding your own cards and not a BGX deck, right? Oh my God, Grace, thanks for the sub, buddy. Really appreciate it. A whole year. That's awesome, buddy. Really appreciate the support. That's awesome. The curse still lives. The curse has been solved. I want to touch on this card. I know this isn't an Abzan card per se. This is going to be something that goes into Rakdos or Jund. I want to touch on this because I don't think this will necessarily go into a mid-range deck. I think this will slot really nicely into like some sort of like black-red prison deck. I don't know if Fluffy's still here. I kind of want to talk to him about this card actually. But I think this is a card that's really cool because, you can destroy a lot of things against Hammer or like all the red decks. So like you actually don't want to play a lot of these 1 mana, CMC cards. that Jun would play, like Darcy, Ragavan, all the one drops you can fetch with Urza Saga, Shadow Spear, exactly, right? So I this card is really cool in a deck that's more of like a control deck. That's why I was kind of thinking more prison, because like what's a control deck that's like red black, right? It could be like Grixis control. That could be another example. But I think this would be a really cool card in that deck, kind of like sideboard potentially, because you can wipe the board and then you exile all graveyards against all the Luris decks, and then it just turns into a threat. So I think this card does a lot of things that are going to be really, 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 potentially useful. I just don't think it'll be in Jund, because like they have Kruxa, like Aspiring Spike has versions with Seasoned Pyromancer, Tarmogoyf, Red and Six. Like the second chapter is why it wouldn't fit in traditional BGX midrange decks, but I do think this card will see play, just because of the fact that it's like a 3-mana sweeper that exiles all graveyards against the Luris decks, and then it turned into a threat. Like this card does a lot. So I'm actually really excited to see how this card plays out in the format, because I think it'll be just a really, really solid card. It's not going to break the format or anything, but I do think this card is going to see play in decks that would slot it in without, that doesn't get hit by their drawbacks. So that's why I was thinking like some sort of Rakdos prison deck, or like some sort of like Grixis control deck, something like that, where I can see this like being really good, especially like when you're against those kind of prison control decks, you're gonna board all your spot removal, and then when this turns into a creature, it's kind of huge, right? So it'll be interesting to see. So now all those kind of cards I kind of want to get out of the way. Could talk about cards that are going to be slotting in the Abzan. March of the Otherworldly Light is a 1x converter instant spell that's essentially a removal spell. You can exile white cards from your hand, and for each white card you exile, it costs 2 less. And then you can exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment with mana value extra less. So I think a lot of people were like, oh, this will replace Prismatic Ending. I think that's incorrect. I think you supplement Prismatic Ending with this card. I think there's situations where I have like 3 Prismatic Ending, 1 Portable Hole, and I think this is going to be a meta call on if you want to go with a Portable Hole or a March. So this card has cons. If you wanted to exile a 1-mana creature, let's say a Ragavan or a Darcy, this costs 2. So it's a 2-mana instant that kind of breaks even with Abrupt Decay. So that's why I say that this card is taking over the Abrupt Decay slot. I know decks are kind of steering away from Abrupt Decay, but like the Abrupt Decay Assassin Trophy, that's the slot. Because with how low to the ground the meta is, being able to exile these 1-mana threats costing 2, you want that to replace that slot, because you still need 1-mana answers to Ragavan, Darcy, Amulet, Expedition Map. So Prismatic Ending is very important. Do not cut your Prismatic Endings. I still think you want minimum of 3 Prismatic Endings, and then you supplement those 3 Prismatic Endings with 1 March. The other downsides is this actually doesn't exile Red and 6 or Teferi. So like not being able to hit Planeswalkers is huge. That's a huge con. Like Prismatic Ending, like you can, it sucks Prismatic Ending a Red and 6 on turn 2, but you have an answer to it that's very clean. This does not. This does not answer Red and 6, and that sucks. And like, let's say for example, like a Teferi, 3-mana exile the 3-mana Teferi, this doesn't answer it either. So there are some blind spots to this card. So those are all the cons, but the pros are you can exile a Urza Saga for 1 mana. So being able to like 1-mana Stone Rain as Saga is huge. Like just that tempo play of just like Stone Raining them is just insane. Also note that this card is an instant versus Prismatic Ending being a sorcery. So like as Last mentioned in the chat, like dashing a Ragavan like is so huge against Prismatic Endings, because obviously it's a sorcery speed spell, so you can't answer it. So this card can actually answer a Ragavan that's dashed. And then it kind of scales up, because like I said, I like to compare this to Abrupt Decay. So once you're starting to target like 2 mana creatures like a Tarmogoyf, if you're trying to answer alerts, that's where you start becoming mana, like, I guess you start losing on the mana exchange because Exile Alerts costs 4 versus like an Abrupt Decay, it costs 2, obviously. I think this is where the versatility kicks in. So I know it's going to be really difficult to like answer an Omnath, a Fury, a Solitude, even like a Murktide or a Wurmcoil Engine. That's where it's really starts reaching because you need like 7 or 8 mana. That being said, this could still potentially answer those cards. It's going to be really difficult. It's going to suck when you have to pitch like an Esper Sentinel or something, but you can do it. And I think the fact that it's not a completely dead removal spell in your hand, it's just an expensive one. I think, it might be worth it to have something that is just expensive than a dead card, right? So like, there's games where you have an Abrupt Decay in hand and you're facing like an Omnath and you're like, crap, right? Or a Murktide or a Fury of Solitude. That's why Abrupt Decays are, well positioned in my opinion. At least this card, granted it's very mana intensive, will answer it, right? So though it's like a very wide spectrum, like a very like fluid, like, is this card good or bad? And it's like, it's just gonna be so situational. I firmly believe that it should be like a one of maybe two. Again, takes the Abrupt Decay slot. But I think it's still worth considering just having in your toolbox. Again, I don't replace Prismatic Getting. It can replace the Abrupt Decay slot. Oh yeah, that's true, Lascar. You can if you have multiples of these, you can pitch one march to the first one, right? So they're actually pretty decent in multiples. That's a very, very good point. So we're gonna go into some heavy hitters here. Boseiju. Boseiju is kind of all over Magic Twitter saying how broken this card is. I really don't think this card is broken. I think this card is good. It has a high floor. It is not broken. I don't think it's designed very well because I don't like these quote unquote free lands. And I think this card is kind of a trap because you're like, oh yeah, this could answer Blood Moon, but you still need a basic forest. And the way Jund and Abzan's going right now, green is turning into the splash color with discard spells, Kroxa, all the red cards, obviously Ragavan, Darcy, and Abzan's its discard spells, Voidwalker, Esper Sentinel. Green is the splash color, really splashing green for Tarmogoyf and Abzan, and then Jund, it's splashing green for a Ren and 6, right? So squeezing this land into those mana bases is not free. It really isn't. So it'll be difficult and interesting to see how it slots into Jund. It is obviously possible, especially when all these Jund decks are going to go on the Reclaimer side of things. So, if you're going to have all these turn 1 green, turn 1 untapped green sources for Reclaimer, this card can slot into Jund most likely. But I think you're going to have to make some sacrifices like cutting Kroxa from the deck if you're going to incorporate Basic Forest and Boseiju. I think that's too many black and red sources for it to be good in Jund. And then let's pivot to Abzan. Does this work in Abzan? Especially without red and 6, I don't think this makes the cut. I can see the argument that it is free, right? But I think with the number of black sources we need for Turak in the sideboard, number of white sources we need on turn 1 for Esper Sentinel and Prismatic Ending, I honestly don't see room for this card. Maybe it could be a 25th land, but I don't think this deck needs a 25th land just to incorporate a Assassin's Trophy effect. Maybe if the meta goes really, really Tron heavy or Amulet heavy, then I can be all right, we kind of have to warp our deck a little bit, put it in the main, and, hopefully the mono green source doesn't really burn us. That being said, it will see play, it will be good, it's not broken, as Magic Twitter likes to exclaim. Since we went over the green one, I'm gonna go over the black and white ones because again we are talking about Abzan cards. I think both of them can see potential because again these are free, quote unquote, when these are your primary colors. So example, like we have Urborg as our like mono black source slot on top of a basic swap. So I can see this replacing like an Urborg if we're not gonna have like Turak on the sideboard. Just again, it's free. We can mill, and then like we can return a Tarmogoyf for a Voidwalker or like a Luris just to ready to recur the Luris. It's expensive because like in Abzan specifically, we don't run many legendary creatures. That's actually only Luris, I think. Oh, I guess we technically have Turk out of the sideboard. So it's not great. Again, if we were more white heavy, if we wanted just like a mono white source, this is again just free. This will probably see play in like taxes again. Like this, these lands are just so free. If you have like enough basics to play on Blood Moon, like what's the third basic planes where you can just have an Eiganjo, right? So just, and especially like these Urza Saga decks where you're incentivized to run 24 lands and have a low CMC count with Luris, I can honestly see like running one of these. Again, just because it's free. Aegon in that red white blade. Yeah, exactly. Just like if you have, and the thing about it is like it's deals 4 damage to target blocking creature too. So if your creature has trample, like Channel will do 4 damage to kill the blocker. It's essentially kind of like a ruleable spell, right? It's I think it's cool. Oh, and especially because the red fervent champion I think is legendary, right? Or is no? It's I don't think it's legendary. Never mind. I take that back. But like if like Ragavan decks, right? Just like Ragavan's a legendary, so just like reducing these costs are just so huge too. Because like 2 mana deal 4 is actually pretty efficient, right? So again, these cards are good. These cards are almost free. They just need to be your primary colors. Do not play these lands if these are your splash colors. So like again, since Boseiju is green, if it's green is your splash color, don't play it unless you can really get away with it, and especially like a 3-color deck. So like Boseiju, I think it would be really good in black green rock because it's your primary color. Just slot one in. It's so free, right? It's so good. But I think people fall in these fallacies of just like maybe it's just me. I feel like I'm just like a stickler with being consistent with mana and being able to cast your spells consistently. But I think again, just please don't play these cards and just throw them in, especially in multiples if they're not your primary color. That's all I'm asking. The next card someone wanted me to touch on from the Discord. It's Kappa Tech-Wrecker. I know people have always asked me how like Outland Liberator is in the deck, and I think Outland Liberator is kind of the cream of the crop for these type of 2 mana naturalized effects, right? I think this card is cute. It kind of provides, I don't want to say value, but kind of like a different kind of angle of attack, I would say. Just because of the fact that like it's a 2 mana 1/3 death touch, which is kind of a cool like it essentially like stonewalls the board. But what's cool is like when it deals damage, you can remove it and then you can exile something. So it's like it's cool because it can sit on the battlefield and just like make them have like an evasive creature. So let's say like against Hammer, it's like, well, you can't just suit up a big creature and then attack because you'll just trade with it. But then all these decks are also running Shadow Spear, and these decks also run Inkmoth Nexus. And then if you want to bring in amulets, like this isn't that great of a clock. So I still think compared to Outland Liberator is like just way better than this. There is some argument about it being able to recur with Luris. So like, like you can just keep recurring a Death Toucher. That's kind of cool. So it's like, again, it's like if you're comparing it to like a straight like Outland Liberator or like a Sealer Primary, like that kind of effect, like this just provides like a really different angle, which is really interesting. I still don't think it's good compared to Outland Liberator because like Modern is just so efficient and you need to be able to do the thing you want to do efficiently. And Outland Liberator is just literally 1 mana sack it and destroy something, right? With the 2 mana CMC. This has a lot of work to actually destroy an artifact or enchantment. That being said, it's cool in a way that's different, right? So it'll be interesting. Don't think it's going to be C play, but I just wanted to point out because someone asked about me talk about it in the Discord. The next card is the card I'm most excited about, and that's Lion Sash. This card is, let me actually read the card because this like I actually want to elaborate on this. It's a 2-mana artifact creature equipment cat. It has a scavenging ooze effect that's a little different. You can exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a permanent card, put a +1/+1 counter on Lion Slash. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on Lion Slash, and it's reconfigured for 2. This card is really cool. I think going black white primarily in Abzan and losing green means losing Scavenging Ooze, and Scavenging Ooze is such a good card. What's cool about this card is, so when I compare it to Scavenging Ooze, pros and cons, right? Scavenging Ooze gains life, and for people who played Judd, Ed Rock, and Abzan know that Scavenging Ooze can gain like 7 life, and like that's just a huge life swing, literally wins you the game. On the flip side, Scavenging Ooze, sometimes there just aren't enough creatures in the graveyard, and sometimes that's like kind of bottlenecks, trying to get a quick clock out of Scavenging Ooze. With Lion Sash, you can exile a permanent card. So, fetch lands, baubles, primarily fetch lands because there's just so many of them early on, that this card gets big quick and potentially easier. So, pros and cons, because the life gain is something that, you will definitely miss with this card, especially because it looks so much like Scavenging Ooze. That being said, the fact that it's so, exile any permanent and it grows. So like just like a late game mana sink where potentially that many creatures in the graveyard, who cares? Exile Planeswalker, exile Mishra's Bauble, exile like all those fetch lands in the graveyard. So good. This card is insane. It's gonna be a very, very good role player. It'll just easily slot into the current Abzan Saga list just because of the fact that it's an artifact, so it just grows constructs. So it'll be easy one of, potentially two of, to slot in. But there's also this cool caveat of it being equipment. So you can tutor it with Stoneforge Mystic. So I'm going to delve into a little later, and that's going to be what the next couple cards that we're going to go over is going to be talking about. I think there's a potential to have a Stoneforge Mystic Lurrus deck. Previously, like with Stoneforge Mystic, you have like Batterskull, Cauldra, and the swords. So you literally can't, run Stoneforge Mystic and Lurrus together. Like you just can't. You can have Lurrus as the main deck card, but then you lose a companion. And if you have Lurrus as a main deck card, you can't really win another companion. You can't run Gigantha. So like, it's really, really cool to potentially have a Stoneforge Mystic Lurrus deck, especially since you can recur all the equipment with Lurrus too. So I'm gonna go into a deck list that I'm gonna probably try out once Kamigawa goes live. But again, I think this card fits into a lot of decks. It'll fit into Hammer. Hammer is gonna be insane with this card, just because you can Steel Shaper's Gift for this card, right? Insane. Especially with in a mono white deck, it's gonna be insane, right? So Stoneforge Mystic, Hammer, even just generic white decks like Dax's, right? Abs, and this card is gonna go into so many decks. Buy your foils now. So on the note of Stoneforge Mystic Lurrus decks, this is another card that I think will kind of slot in nicely. It's a 2-mana 3/1 with Menace on its own, but then if you reconfigure for 4 mana, the equipped creature has a base power toughness of 5 of a 5/5 and also has Menace and becomes black. So I think this is kind of a cool card just to be able to tutor up with Stoneforge Mystic. And I think it's going to be one of those situations where Stoneforge Mystic might not necessarily win the game on its own. In the sense that a lot of situations where you go turn 2 Stoneforge Mystic, get Cauldra. Can you deal with the Stoneforge Mystic, or can you go with the Cauldra, or you just die, right? There's a lot of situations where that happens. I think when you have a Stoneforge Mystic Lurrus deck, Stoneforge Mystic is just going to be a value card. It's literally 2 mana replace itself. And then it's just a creature. And then, you can essentially just flash in creatures to block. Not to say this card is going to be good to block with, but then you can just recur it with Lurrus. It'd be interesting to see if there's like a death touching equipment. I have to like kind of go through Scarfall and see that. But I think these are kind of potential cute plays I can do. And I think the recovery cost is going to be interesting, especially since like you can, if you just strap this onto an Esper Sentinel, like a 5 mana menace creature, then taxes your opponent is going to be pretty good. So I think the ceiling on Stoneforge Mystic gets lowered if you have Lurrus as a companion, but I still think it's decent enough where it's just card advantage, right? Cards that just like essentially replace itself is going to be decent. Again, just having these artifact subtypes is going to be really good with like Urza Saga. And then I think cards like Lightning Greaves and Cranial Plating is where I'm going to kind of gear towards, because that way that Cranial Plating gives you that ceiling. Where you have all these artifacts and you can just equip a Cranial Plating on something and then they just become huge. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. So I'll go into that deck list after we go over these last couple cards here. This next card is going to kind of be on that same note of, just cards that we can have in our Stoneforge Mystic package. I don't think this one will see play in that deck just because 2-mana 2/2 lifelink isn't that great. I can see this maybe in against like Burn. But like you already have collector brutalities, and like your collector brutalities are just better. Reconfigure for 4 is really expensive. So I don't think this card will see a play in that deck. But I think again it's just something to consider. Where like your life, just gaining life constantly is going to be worth the consideration. The last card I want to go over is Banishing Slash. I think this card in that artifact deck might be good enough. Where you probably consistently have an artifact. So it's 2 white, sorcery speed, destroy up to 1 target artifact, enchantment, or tap creature. Then if you control an artifact, an enchantment, create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance. So like this card won't see play. I think there is a deck where if you have an artifact and enchantment something, I think this is a card you can have potentially in the sideboard. The fact that you have to have both artifact and enchantment is kind of awkward. But I don't want to rule this out, because if you have like a sentinel and then like a saga, you can go like turn 2, tap saga, get a drum, and then like tap your first white source, tap the drum, and like destroy a saga and make a 2/2. Like this ceiling on this card is really high, so I don't want to discount it. The way you reach that ceiling is a lot of work. So I think this is again like a sideboard card, but I don't want to rule this out. This is something that we're like, if you kind of really go down that rabbit hole, and if that Stoneforge Mystic deck has some potential, and you have like Urza Sagas and potentially other enchantments, I think this may be worth it. Because worst case scenario, it just destroys an artifact, enchantment, or a tapped creature. So the floor on this card is actually pretty high. So it'd be interesting to see if the sees play. It probably won't again, but I still think it's worth keeping tabs on this card, because it's kind of like a what's the 3 mana gain 6, make a soldier, or make 3 soldiers. There's like the 2 mana one where like you can gain 4 life and then make a creature. If you have less creatures, you can have less life. Like, it's potential. Timely reinforcements, thank you. Yeah, so it's like timely reinforcements, and there's like the 2 mana one. I can picture the art. So again, potential, something to keep tabs on, and then we'll go from there. Sunset Reverie, thank you, Grace. Thank you, Last God. But that's all the cards I wanted to go over today. I know a lot of people have been asking about these kind of videos for discussion of spoiler season. Again, that'll be really interesting to see. So now we can go over the deck that I'm going to potentially run. This is the Stoneforge Mystic Lurrus deck that I mentioned. It's going to be Orzhov only. I don't think there's a worthwhile green card to splash for. So unfortunately, I can't keep the Abzan brand alive here. But I think this deck will be really, really interesting. So organize this by mana cost here. So we have 23 lands. I kind of want a 24th. But we have 8 fetches for the Bauble Trick. We have a Goldmire Bridge and a Treasure Vault to have up our artifact count. And then there's a core of like 4 baubles. We have the Springleaf Drum and the Spell Bomb. It'd be interesting to see if this drum is going to be worth it in this deck because it's a little bit more lower ground than Abzan is. But we have the 6 discard spells, 3 push, 2 pending. So you can think of the whole as a 3rd pending. We have 4 Stoneforge Mystic, and then we have Ingenious Smiths just to have artifacts to like. It's essentially like just more card advantage, right? I usually have like Dark Confidant in these builds, but just being able to have cards that replace itself immediately, I think will be really, really cool. And plus, this provides a big body potentially, since this deck doesn't have Tarmogoyf. Tidal Scullers artifacts that just also interact. I really, really like Tidal Sculler. And then from there, we have the equipment package on the right. This Blade Wing is going to be the Blade of the Oni. So it's going to be the 2 mana 3/1 Menace with reconfigure for 4. Base power 5. It becomes a 5/5. And the Lion's Eye Diamond is going to be the Lion Sash. So these are the 2 kind of pseudo replacement because they're not live in Moto, obviously. But then the rest of the equipment package, like when 2-4 with Stoneforge Mystic, is Cradle Plating, which would be really, really good because the whole deck is artifacts. Sentinels, Hole, Tidehauler Sculler, and then just the equipment package to get 2-4. It's mostly artifacts with Gold Mire Bridge and Treasure Vault. I could see maybe messing with the mana a little bit more and have like a second Gold Mire Bridge. Maybe this should just be a second Gold Mire Bridge instead of just a colorless source. But since it's only 2 colors, I'm thinking maybe we can get away with it. So I'm still kind of debating about how I want this rest of the mana base to be. Like maybe I can cut a fetch potentially for a second Gold Mire Bridge just to have more artifacts. But I think this is going to be one of the payoffs we can have in the deck. And the fact that we're primarily black, so being able to like instant speed equip will be really, really cool. Shadow Spear is just going to be a pairing with Urza Saga, so this card is going to be good. And the Lightning Greaves is going to be just another cool card to 2-4 with Stoneforge Mystic, just to have haste. We can make big constructs. We can equip Lightning Greaves onto that construct and attack. We can go turn 2 Lightning Greaves, turn 3 Tidal Skull, and then protect it with Lightning Greaves. It's interesting. I think there's a lot of play with Lightning Greaves, like going lowers protect with Lightning Greaves is going to be interesting. Another note, maybe we can have one of the free legendary lands. Eiganjo or whatever the black one is, we can maybe slot that into the deck. So I'm going to still playing with the mana base. Still probably thinking about, either incorporating the 24th land, a 4th Sculler, or the 4th Ingenious Smith. So we'll see how it goes. 20th land for Bubble seems high. I think with how mana hungry Urza Saga list is, like in my usual Abzan Saga list, I already have 24 lands because you want to for sure consistently your 3rd land or you literally lose the game. So I really want 24 lands if anything. Why is there an LED? I'm using LED as a placeholder for Lion Sash because that card's not live yet from Kamigawa. And then this Blade Wings Thrall is going to be Blade of the Oni. So I kind of like just lift the card that, has the name in it. How's it going, Bajan? Hope you're doing well. And then in the sideboard, we can just have a Menriki Gusari as a way to tutor up with Stoneforge Mystic because we are a Stoneforge Mystic deck. So if Hammer is still tier 1 after Kamigawa, I think this is a card that we can just have in the sideboard for free, essentially. And you can imagine like just going Genriki and then Lightning Greaves in that same and just being able to like if we have a Lightning Greaves to play and we have like a Stoneforge Mystic, like just being able to make this having creatures that can just tap with this immediately is just so huge. So I think having Lightning Greaves is probably the slot that I'm most questionable with this in this build, but again, I think the ceiling is high. What about Vindicate? Vindicate is just so difficult for Modern because 3 mana is just so much. It's just so expensive. Even just the traditional mid-range decks, I think Vindicate is just too expensive, unfortunately. You really want your answers to be 1 mana at most 2, just be able to deal with Ragavan and Darcy. And even on the draw, if they go Saga on turn 2 and you want to Vindicate the Saga, they can still make a construct and you're just losing that exchange. Voidwalker is also an interesting inclusion. I think these Tidal Scholars could easily be a Voidwalker or a Dark Confidant, Mr. Grey Fox. I don't think the double black is going to be too prohibitive because of how many because it's a 2-color deck, you can easily just have double black. I think just having the artifact sub theme is going to be good, especially with Ingenious Smith. I want to have enough targets for this card, and especially I'm building around Cranial Plating with Stoneforge Mystic. That's the reason why we have Tidehollow Scholars in the deck. That might be an argument for maybe trimming on these discard spells, because we already have essentially 9 discard spells. That might be too many. But I think Tidehollow Scholars kind of just synergizes with the rest of the deck, especially it gives more incentive to have Lightning Greaves. To kind of go over how I would change my traditional Abzan Saga deck that I've been kind of jamming for like the past like 5 months now at this point. I have that list brewed up here too. Again, Lion's Eye Diamond is going to be Lion Sash. Let me organize this deck a little bit more so it's a little more easier to view. Ignore the sideboard because the sideboard's probably going to change. That's just what it is currently. But it's going to be a kind of a really minor change. You know, you don't really expect much to change because the power level to keep up with from Modern Horizons 2 is a little too difficult. But just to test how Lion Sash is, I'm kind of the 2 Voidwalkers for Lion Sash. I really, really want Lion Sash in combination with Voidwalker because you can just have a bunch of +1/+1 counters on Lion Slash, equip it to the Voidwalker, and it has Shadow, and you attack for a bunch, right? So I really want to run this in conjunction with Voidwalker. I know there's a Nombo where if you have a Voidwalker in play, there might not be enough cards to eat with this card. I've never been in a situation where I play Voidwalker and there just ends up being nothing in graveyard because it just more often than not eats a removal spell, or it comes in late and there's cards in the graveyard anyway, right? And it doesn't exile those cards that are already there. So again, I think this card's going to be really interesting to see. Because we have Lion Slash to kind of up the artifact count, this portable hole may be a March that I want to test, so I might change that. So this might be a March, and then I'll have 2 Lion Slashes. So like, everything will up an artifact count. Again, we want 2 of these just because I want to see how they will in test. So this will be probably the second list that I play out once Kamigawa is live, but I'll probably really try this Stoneforge Mystic list first. Just something that I've been kind of really thinking, because I've been really trying to fit Stoneforge Mystic in with Luris. I'm not sure if 5 equipment is going to be enough. So that'll be this plus the Lion Slash here. So we have 5 equipment in this deck. But this is a deck that I'm really looking forward to trying out and seeing if can Stoneforge Mystic be effective if you aren't running Conjurer, Swords, or Batterskull. What do you think of the White March versus Prismatic Ending? I touched on that earlier. But just a quick TLDR, you can watch, this video is going to go on YouTube. But just touch on quickly, I think that's a card that shouldn't replace Prismatic Ending. It should be a card that supplements Prismatic Ending. I think you should run if you're going to run Prismatic Ending, you should run 3 of them, unless one of them is going to be a portable hole. So imagine this just being the third portable hole, because you need 3 1-mana effects out on top of like 3 Fatal Push. You essentially want 6 1-mana answers to Ragavan. So then that way you can supplement that with a March, and March should replace the Abrupt Decay slot. That's kind of to sum up my thoughts on that card. But yeah, that'll do it for this video. That's going to go on YouTube. If you have any thoughts on the cards that I mentioned, post it in the comments. If you have any extra cards that you want me to comment on that I didn't touch on in the video, you can again post in the comments, or you can join the Discord and ask there. Other than that, I really appreciate everyone's support from the YouTube channel. I know a lot of people post comments and say some really nice things, so I really appreciate it. And I've been having a lot of requests going over these, the new sets from every set. So like, it's been kind of fun kind of going over, like parsing through to see what may potentially see play. But again, I'm really excited to try this Stoneforge Mystic deck. I'm really excited to see how Lion Sash fares in the Saga build. I don't know how good this deck will be, but it'll be fun, and there'll be a lot of value in the deck because all these tree drops are gonna just gain value, right? It's either gonna take a card or it's going to gain a card, right? So that's kind of speaks to the Abzan player. So again, if you want to support the channel, you can hit that subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. If you haven't yet, you can follow me on Twitch, and all the links will be in the description below. Again, if there's any feedback on the cards or any kind of other comments you want to hit on that I might have missed, or any points that you disagree on, you can post in the comments. And that, really appreciate it for all the support, and I will catch everyone next time. Take care. Bye.